It was a warm afternoon, and the sun was slowly starting to go down behind the trees. 3 boys were walking home together, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, still laughing about a joke one of them had made during basketball practice. Their shoes kicked up little clouds of dust as they made their way along the quiet 2-lane road. They always took this route home. It was peaceful, lined with tall trees and birds chirping. But that day, something was different. Up ahead, parked near the edge of the road, was a shiny black car. One of the boys squinted his eyes. "Is that smoke?" he asked Dot as they got closer. They saw a man standing next to the car, bent down near one of the tires. It was flat, completely out of air. The man stood up and wiped his forehead with a handkerchief, looking tired and frustrated. He was dressed in a neat button-down shirt and trousers, and his shoes didn't look like they were meant for walking much. The boys exchanged glances. "Should we help him?" one of them asked quietly. "Why not?" the other replied with a shrug. "We've still got time before it gets dark." They walked over carefully and stopped a few feet away so they wouldn't scare the man. "Sir, do you need help?" one of them asked politely. The man turned and looked surprised to see them. "Oh," he said. "I wasn't expecting anyone around here." He looked at the flat tire, then back at the boys. "I've been trying to get this thing changed for the past hour, but I can't seem to get the jack to work properly." One of the boys stepped forward. "We've helped our uncle with his car before. Maybe we can give it a try?" The man paused. Then he nodded. "All right, just be careful." The 3 boys dropped their backpacks and got to work. One held the flashlight from his phone while the other 2 helped lift the car and remove the flat tire. It wasn't easy, the bolts were tight, and the ground was a bit uneven. But they didn't complain. They just kept working, helping each other with small hand gestures and quiet encouragement. The man stood to the side, watching them closely. He didn't say much, but he seemed impressed. After about 30 minutes, the spare tire was in place. One of the boys even checked it for air. "I think it's good to go now," he said. The man looked genuinely thankful. "I honestly don't know what I would have done without you boys," he said. "You didn't have to stop. Most people would have just walked by." One of the boys smiled and said, "That's what our parents taught us. Help where you can." The man nodded slowly, as if those words meant more to him than he let on. Then he opened his wallet. "Here," he said, pulling out some cash. "Please take this." The boys shook their heads. "No, thank you, sir. We didn't help for money." He looked surprised again. "Are you sure?" They nodded. "We're just glad you're safe." The man put the money back in his wallet. Still staring at them. "Well," he said, "I'll remember this. All of you. Thank you." He gave a small smile, then got into his car and slowly drove away down the road. The boys watched the taillights fade into the distance. They picked up their bags and continued walking home, not thinking much of it. Just another good deed. Just another evening. They didn't talk much after that, just walked together quietly, the way people do when they feel good inside. None of them had any idea that this one simple act of kindness was about to change everything. Not one of them knew that the man they helped wasn't just any man, and none of them would that ever imagined what would be waiting at their front door the very next morning. Asterisk. The next morning started like any other. The boys were up early getting ready for school. One of them had just finished brushing his teeth while the other 2 were eating breakfast at the small dining table. The house was quiet except for the sound of cereal crunching and a kettle whistling softly in the kitchen. Outside, the neighborhood was slowly waking up. Kids were heading to the bus stop, and a few neighbors were out watering their plants. Everything felt normal, calm, predictable. But then, something unexpected happened. A black SUV rolled into the street. It was sleek, shiny, and looked way too expensive to be driving around this part of town. It stopped right in front of the house. The engine turned off, and for a moment, everything stood still. one of the boys looked out the window. "Hey, you guys see that?" The others rushed to look. They recognized it instantly. It was the same kind of vehicle the man from yesterday had driven, only this one looked even newer, more polished. "Why is it stopping here?" one whispered. Tall man in a suit stepped out of the driver's side. He wasn't the man from yesterday, but he looked professional, like someone who worked for someone important. He had a clipboard in one hand and something else tucked under his arm. Their mother peeked through the curtain, confused and concerned. "Who is that?" She opened the door slightly. The suited man took a few steps forward and gave a polite nod. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I'm sorry to bother you so early. I'm here on behalf of Mr. John." The name struck something in the boys' minds. "That's him," one of the boys whispered. "Mr. John?" their mom asked. Man smiled. "Yes, ma'am. Yesterday, your boys helped him with his car on Oak Ridge Road. He hasn't stopped talking about it since. He asked me to personally come by and deliver this." He handed over a sealed envelope. It looked expensive, heavy paper. Gold trim. Their mother took it slowly, still unsure. "And," the man added, "he'd like to meet your family this weekend. If that's all right with you." She glanced at her boys. They were just as shocked as she was. Before anyone could ask more, the man handed over a small black card with a phone number and address on it. "If you have any questions, please call. Mr. John hopes to see you soon." He gave one final nod, walked back to the SUV, and drove away just as calmly as he'd arrived. Inside the house, everything was quiet. Nobody knew what to say. Their mom carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten and neat. It said thank you. Not just a normal thank you, but a deeply personal one. Mr. John wrote about how much their small act of kindness had meant to him. How rare it was to find young people who helped without expecting anything in return. He said their actions reminded him of something he had lost in his own life. At the bottom of the letter, in bold handwriting, were the words, "Some moments change everything. Let this be one of them." Attached to the letter was a special invitation to visit a place called the Horizon Foundation. It looked like something official, something important. The date was set for Saturday. The boys didn't know what to think. They were still trying to understand why someone so rich and important would go through all this trouble, just for helping change a tire. But what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Something bigger was waiting for them. Something they couldn't yet imagine. Saturday came quickly. The boys had been thinking about it all week. None of them said much out loud, but deep down, they were all curious and a little nervous. They didn't know what kind of place the Horizon Foundation was, or what would happen there. But they knew it had to be something important. People like Mr. John didn't invite kids like them for nothing. Their families dressed up nicely, nothing fancy, just their best clothes. Their mom had ironed their shirts the night before. One of the boys even wore shoes he usually saved for church. A black SUV arrived right on time, just like the letter had promised. The same man from before stepped out and smiled warmly. "Ready?" he asked. They all nodded. Their mom held her purse tightly and gave the boys a look that meant behave yourselves, be respectful, and don't touch anything unless you're told. The ride was smooth and quiet. They passed neighborhoods they'd never seen before, big houses with wide yards and tall gates. Finally, they pulled up in front of a modern-looking building with glass walls and a soft golden sign that read, "The Horizon Foundation." Inside, everything felt calm and warm. The lobby was bright, filled with art on the walls, and peaceful music played in the background. A woman at the front desk welcomed them with a smile. "Mr. John is expecting you," she said. "Please follow me." They were led through a hallway, into a large room with soft chairs and big windows. And then, there he was. Mr. John stood up from his chair and walked toward them, smiling not like a billionaire, but like a kind uncle. "You came," he said. "Thank you." He shook each of their hands. Then he sat down with them and began to talk not about money, not about business, but about life. He told them he grew up in a neighborhood not too different from theirs. His family had struggled. He had worked hard and gotten lucky. But along the way, he said, he had started to forget the little things, the moments that mattered, the people who helped without asking for anything back. When I saw you three helping me on that road, he said, it reminded me of who I used to be. And it reminded me of the world I want to help build again. The boys listened quietly. Their mom nodded, holding back emotion. Mr. John continued, I started this foundation to help kids like you, kids who have heart, who do the right thing even when no one's watching. Then he handed them each a folder. Inside were papers. That made their mouths fall open. It was more than just thank you. These were scholarship papers, mentorship programs, summer camps, personal tutors, learning trips, and even support for their families. Everything from education to career guidance already arranged, already paid for. One of the boys looked up, confused. Why us? He asked softly. Mr. John smiled again. Because you didn't ask for anything, and that's exactly why you deserve everything. Their mom held her hand to her chest, eyes watery, unsure if she should cry or speak. I don't want anything back, he said. But I ask you one thing: when the time comes, help someone the way you helped me. Keep the kindness moving forward. There was silence in the room for a few seconds. Heavy, meaningful silence. And just like that, everything had changed. 3 boys who had just tried to do a good deed on a quiet road were now standing at the edge of a new life, not because they were rich, not because they were famous, but because they were kind. The ride home that evening was quiet, but not in a bad way. The boys sat in the back seat of the black SUV, still holding the folders Mr. John had given them. Their mom sat in front, looking out the window, her eyes blinking more than usual. She wasn't crying, but only because she was holding it in. No one really knew what to say. The day had been too big, too surprising. The boys kept looking at the papers again and again, as if they had to double-check they were real. Everything about it felt like a dream, but it wasn't. They were really going to get help with school. Real mentors, real opportunities. And for their families, support too. When they got home, neighbors peeked out their windows as the black SUV pulled up again. But this time, the boys didn't feel nervous. They walked inside and sat around the dining table, still speechless. Their mom finally broke the silence. You know why this happened? She said softly. Because you chose to be good, even when no one was watching. You didn't laugh and walk away. You didn't ask for money. You just did what was right. The boys nodded, slowly beginning to understand just how big of a moment this was. Over the next few weeks, everything started changing, but not in loud, flashy ways. There were no cameras, no news stories. Mr. John didn't want attention, and neither did the boys, but their lives were shifting. Every Saturday, they were picked up and taken to the Foundation's campus, where they learned things their schools didn't teach: how to handle money, how to speak with confidence, how to set goals and follow through. They met other kids like them, from different parts of the city, all chosen because they had shown kindness without expecting anything in return. Each visit felt like stepping into a different world, a world that believed in them. Back in their own neighborhood, people began to notice something. The boys walked a little taller. They smiled more. They were still the same kids, still helpful, still respectful. But now, something had changed inside them. They were starting to believe that their future could be more than just getting by. One day, while walking back from the store, they saw a man trying to push his broken-down car out of the middle of the road. Without even speaking, the boys ran over to help. No hesitation, no cameras, no reward expected. A neighbor across the street noticed and whispered to someone, "That's them." The boys from the black SUV Word slowly spread not about the scholarships or the foundation, but about the way the boys carried themselves. Quietly kind, always helping, never bragging. Even their teachers at school started paying closer attention. I don't know what happened. One teacher said to another, but those boys, something lit up in them. It wasn't money. It wasn't fame. It was something deeper. It was purpose. And every time they visited the foundation, Mr. John reminded them, this isn't about being saved. This is about being seen. You always had it in you. Someone just needed to notice. And someone had. A man with a flat tire on the side of a quiet road had noticed. And now, their whole world was changing one quiet Saturday at a time. Months passed. The boys were no longer just the kids who helped a stranger. They had become something more, not because of what they received, but because of what they continued to give. Their lives were fuller now. Not easy, but filled with direction. They were studying harder, speaking more confidently, and looking after the younger kids in their neighborhood. They helped carry groceries for neighbors, walked elderly people across the street, and even stayed after school to tutor kids who were falling behind. People noticed, their families noticed, but most of all, the boys noticed the change within themselves. Every weekend at the foundation, Mr. John would sit with them and just talk. Not about success or money, but about values, about kindness, about not letting the world harden your heart. He reminded them every time why they were chosen. You didn't help me because I was rich. You didn't even know who I was. You helped because you saw someone who needed a hand. That's what makes the difference. One Saturday afternoon, after a long day of learning and sharing, Mr. John invited them into a quiet room. On the table were 3 small boxes. Inside each was a simple chain necklace with a round metal pendant. Engraved on each one were the words, "Keep the kindness going." It wasn't flashy. It wasn't gold or diamond. But to the boys, it meant everything. Mr. John placed one around each of their necks and said, "These aren't rewards. These are reminders. You've already earned them." The boys thanked him, their voices quiet but full of feeling. That night, back at home, they sat outside on the front steps, watching the sky turn purple and blue. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. One of them finally said, "Crazy how all this started with just a flat tire." The others nodded. Another added, "What if we just walked past him that day?" Silence again, but they all knew the answer. That one moment, that simple choice to stop and help, had opened a door none of them could have ever imagined. Not just a door to opportunities, but a door to becoming better people. And it didn't end with them. As the weeks rolled on, more kids from their neighborhood were invited to the foundation. Not because of luck, but because these 3 boys had inspired others to care more, help more, and believe more. Kindness had started to spread quietly, like a ripple in water. And that was the real gift. Not the SUV, not the scholarships, not the fancy buildings, but the reminder that good still exists, that people still notice, and that doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, is never wasted. Because you never know who you're helping, and you never know what it might lead to.